What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another update on the Reef tank. Boy oh boy, we have ran into a bunch of issues with this tank. Super unstable right now, so yeah, let's get right into it. All right, so first off, we're still dealing with algae. A lot of algae is kind of growing back and forth, and I had some issues with phosphates. Nitrates was basically at like 3 forever. It just wouldn't go up, and I was trying to bring up that level by feeding a little bit more and whatnot. But with phosphate, so on my previous video with my freshwater, I showed you guys that we had a bunch of algae bloom in that tank, and it came out to be the tap water having super high phosphates coming out there for whatever reason. TDS, everything on the tap water shot up. The water like tasted like super like nasty, the drinking water. And then when I went to do my RO water for this reef tank, the phosphates was like 0.1 coming out after the filter and everything, right? It turned out to be my RO membrane being old. Changed that, got it all situated. TDS is back down to 0. I even put Phospan in like my RO/DI water container just to, you know, pull any like phosphates that are kind of leaching that might be from the RO/DI unit not filtering out completely. But anyway, so phosphate basically was swinging in this tank from like 0.1 something back down to like 0.04, back to up to like, basically every time I was doing a water change in here, I was adding more phosphates in here, which was feeding the algae, which was causing the tank to be super unstable. And so here we are today. Pretty much all the SPS bleach completely back because of that. On top of that, alkalinity was kind of just, you know, swinging back and forth because we're having growth in some of the corals, and then some of the coralline algae starting to bloom in the tank, right? And so it's starting to consume it. And I was basically doing a manual dose, 2-part just by hand. I have like the cups up there, and then testing it, and then dosing, and then testing. So like we had like, you know, basically ups and downs for about a couple weeks. And then finally, you know, I have my auto doser unit. I just haven't set it up. Finally got the time to figure out how to do it. Have it set up here. And then, so here are the containers and waters are all over the place. Obviously, I just kind of threw it together. But the dosers, we have 2 of them, or 4 of them. And we have the containers here. So this one's gonna be my calc. I have 2-part, which I will probably eventually have to tap into once the corals are growing. And then these 2 are fertilizers for the macroalgae / feeding the reef tank. So one is just an all-in-one fertilizers for the macroalgae. And the other one is nitrates that I'm kind of experimenting with, just to kind of bring up the levels a little bit. It's the dose is in very small increments, but it's just to feed the tank, because so when I would test nitrates with the API test kit, it's like 0 always, but when I test it with, you know, something that can actually read it, it's like at 3 something. It's like really low. So I want to bring it up to like 5, 10-ish range, right? So obviously the algae in the tank is consuming that as well. So eventually we need to get rid of the algae, and then just strictly have the macroalgae and do all the work. But yeah, so that's where we're at in the tank. We have a lot of swings, which basically wiped out all the SPS. And pretty much this tank is so unbalanced that I don't think we're gonna be ready for SPS anytime soon. I'm just gonna basically, you know, keep the softies, whatever SPS I have left. I did pick up a few like more resilient SPS that basically survived. But we'll see what happens, right? These guys went through their survival, and all these guys just completely bleach. I even like acclimated these guys correctly in terms of lighting, right? Every like week and a half, I moved them up slowly until here, but like they're not even up to like where their, you know, levels are, and they already bleached out because, you know, the tank was just so erratic. And so yeah, so the goal for the next couple weeks, months or so is just to stabilize the tank, get the pH stabilized, because the pH in this tank would go up to like 8 point something, like 8.1, and then like at night it would drop down like below like 7.8 and sometimes 7.7. And so I've been trying to bring that up with calc dosing, and that's why I actually brought that in to stabilize the pH a little bit better, and then also the alkalinity and whatnot. Just want to stabilize everything in the tank. So hopefully by running that for the next couple weeks here, it's going to be stabilized. Everything is very, very recent in terms of the setting up the dose, so it's probably like the first week right now, and numbers are coming out like about the same, but I'm noticing, you know, things are kind of going up a little bit in terms of like pH. Alk, I'll just kind of keep it stabilized at where it's at, like 7.7 to like 8 range, and just hopefully just keep it in that range without having too much change, because fluctuation in this tank is just like crazy. And then I had 2 more issues that basically probably added to this, and I'll go over in a second here. But here's the overall tank. Fish are doing good. I'm not really going to go over the corals just because I don't know if they're going to survive. There's no point in me just telling you what recently I've got, and then it's just going to bleach. So, you know, you can kind of take a look at what we have. A lot of softies. Softies are doing good. GSP is obviously like bulletproof and they're not going to die. Unfortunately, I also lost my giant crown snail. I don't know if he just died because of the swings, could be, or the algae that he's eating could be poisonous. I know some of these cyanobacteria, because I had a little bit on the floor and then went away, and now it's just like the straight algae. I know some of the algae that they eat or can eat is kind of poisonous to some of the snails, and they'll just kind of die over time. So I don't know if that's what happened, because a lot of these snails, they kind of just stay in one place for a while like that. So I don't know if, you know, what's causing that. Fortunately, we lost a big guy. I really liked him. He was pretty awesome. The turtle snail, the turtle snails are still doing okay. They're just kind of roaming around, but we'll probably need a couple more turtle snails or whatnot, because the fish are also eating the snails, and I've been pulling out bodies and tossing those guys as well. So unfortunately, these 2 guys here, and then there's a bunch more. There's another dead guy over there. So they go through the snails, so it's kind of like a every couple months you kind of have to replace them, which is kind of expensive. Okay, so a few changes that I've done. I finally did my first maintenance on the gyres. Super easy. Soaked it in just like, you know, citrus acid, and just kind of just rinsed it out, and the water flow was like 1,000,000 times better. And that's unfortunate, because like these guys, they basically like lose like flow like within a couple months. And granted, like, you know, the first couple months or so of, you know, cycling through this, we had a lot of algae that bloom, a lot of like debris that just kind of like got stirred and pushed around. So it was working overtime. So washed it, and we got so much better flow. Like, it's just way better. Like, it was night and day different. So the flow thing definitely helped clean that. So it was awesome. With the algae, I dialed down the lighting by 1 hour just to kind of see if it will help kind of, you know, get rid of this algae. The sump though, I turned up the hours down there so that the macroalgae can consume a lot of this stuff, or basically outcompete the algae up in the display room. All right, so we are in the sump here, and we got a skimmer. I bought it used for like $100, pretty cheap. The reason why I got a skimmer is trying to help stabilize pH or bring it up above the 8.0 range during nighttime. And right now I'm just trying to dial the skimmer in. It's just overflowing right now, but I'm waiting on a little platform thing. I can use crate, these egg crate things to kind of lift it up, but I bought this 3D printed thing that, it's adjustable, so we'll kind of dial in the skimmer with that. I made a little wall here, so the skimmer is going to be on this side. I removed the macroalgae portion over there, so we only have the blue macroalgae that's growing in there. Obviously there's a bunch of bioballs here. The reason why I'm using the bioballs is here on the sump design that this area here isn't really utilized, and I put the macroalgae over here. We still have our pond matrix in there for the beneficial bacteria, but I decided to put those guys back here so that we can develop the beneficial bacteria back there. It's just kind of pushed all the way down, filled to the top. We'll kind of get that going And then once that's good for the next couple weeks, we'll remove the pond matrix completely out of that, so that we have a whole section here that macroalgae can grow in. So we have the shado and we have the Crylarpa that's growing in here. We have both of these kind of hovered over there. These are on 12 hours, so it's just shining here 12 hours. This is only on, I believe, 10 or 9 hours, and it'll just turn off. All these floating here is just going to be there for now as it builds up the beneficial bacteria. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those, I'm going to put those kind of, because they kind of float like that, we'll put them under here, and then these guys can grow on top of those. And I think that'd be pretty cool. Something a little bit different. I've never used these kind of plastic bio ball things, but hey, we can try something new. Tank. We got the clownfish, the little nems in here. They are doing okay, I think. I need to actually move these guys across over here. So every time I go shut off the pump, the water level will come up here and they just float, across out of this thing here. So while I'm still doing this, the other reason why I decided to get a skimmer, initially I was going to get a skimmer. I just was like, I probably don't need it with the macroalgae, and that's true, probably don't need it, but I want to run or try to run ozone in the future. I was doing a lot of research on it. Clarity, the smell, especially the smell, is one thing, and also like kind of bringing up, some of the OPR, basically the oxygen levels in the tank. I want to try that in the future, and so one way to do it is getting a reactor or getting a skimmer. Looked into reactors. The reactors are just crazy expensive, and then just buying a used skimmer is like $100. So I just way cheaper, right? Just getting even a smaller one. This one was like a decent size, where it's actually I can actually use it for this tank. It still might be on the small side once this thing is stocked up, but I'm going to use it mainly probably just to create micro bubbles, all the way up to here somewhere, to bring up pH, and then to deal with ozone in the future maybe. So a few other things that happened that contribute to just the SBS stripping back to bleaching was, so I made this cover here, drilled some holes or whatever in this tube here. So I couldn't use this over here because that's where I was clamping before across like 2 tanks. So I put it over here, and then for this tube here, I decided to like put it like lower, like down here, and I forgot that when the pump turns on, it pumps the the water across, right? But then when you turn it off, it creates a siphon because you have water in there, and because that tube was lower down here and the water was filled up here, it basically drained the water from here down to here into the sump, and this basically raised this from here to like back up here. And I was like, oh, what the heck? I forgot about that. So that's why this is higher and that tube is like up higher, so that it basically breaks siphon when it's filled, right? And I might actually even like bring it up over there and then back down, so that way it breaks siphon completely and it doesn't create that little loop. And so I was thinking back, like when my dad was like washing the tank, I think that I have to go back in the footage, but I think that I might have had that lower, and that's why that was higher. So that was probably even not my dad's fault. Again, I have to double check on this footage, and so that problem is now fixed by just wrapping that around. Another thing that I was having issues was with every time the pump would turn off. Obviously the water comes up here, like water comes back down and back siphons because I don't have a check valve. They don't have a check valve design in this model, and so we had micro bubbles that would just shoot up here, and then so the pH probe would just go whack when there's like a bubble in there, and by whack I mean it would just look like it was just dropping like crazy. And then so like I was like, oh man, what the heck is going on? So what would happen was micro bubbles would come down here and it would affect the probe reading. And so like the salinity probe, for example, like this black one here, it was over here and I moved it, but because it's so close to this pump that it would create like basically just air bubbles trapped under the probe reading, and it would just throw off salinity like crazy. Okay, so this is what was happening with the tank here. So this is my salinity probe, and look at this. It happened twice, like 3 times. Like I literally would just drop from like good all the way down to like crazy. And then like because of this here, I thought the tank was like just going out of whack, so I just like would do like a water change or just like, you know, add a little bit more salt mix into it, and then it's just like, what the heck's going on? So this basically created like panic mode, you know, because this is like at what time is this? This is like at night. Same thing here, right? It would just drop all the way down to like nothing. This was at like night, and I was like, oh my god, what the heck's going on? React to it, and then I found out that, you know, it's the probe, because then it would happen again, and then like again, right? Like look at this, again, all the way down to like nothing, and bring it back up, and then whoop, right back up. It's because this freaking micro bubbles, and then like I would freak out because like this thing would send alarms. And so now that I moved the probe, like this is after I moved the probe, because this happened like so many times. I moved the probe and it's like a little bit more stable. It still drops every time I would turn off the pump and whatnot. But now I know not to react when we have crazy drops like this, because it's most likely the probe that is like messed up. And then my OPR has been recently dropping because I've been, you know, doing the dose, and it has a lot of more organics and whatnot in the tank. So this is going to be good and ideal for running, you know, ozone layer, just because when it gets way too high up here, like we can't even run ozone. 350 is the ideal like max that you want to run it at. Anyways, so we'll see there. Here's my pH. My pH literally has been, here's the scary part here. So it would be like at, you know, good 8.1, and then like at night 7.7. It was like getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and so I was like, what the heck's going on? So that's when I started putting in the skimmer. I put it around like, I think around like this day here somewhere. And I didn't really turn it on, to be honest, because I don't have like all the things set up. But this is when I started putting in like the calc dosing and the auto dosing. And as you can see here, it's a lot wider, right? So that means pH is not dropping as rapidly, it's just spreading. So this is like a full dose of like my calc kind of somewhat dialed in. I measured like my alk. I'll show you my alk. My alk is like literally all over. So 7.5 right now. And there's something wrong with my readings too. Like look at this. I would read like, so this is what's going on here. I was like, I would read like Sunday, and then like the same day it would drop, which is not, you know, that's normal. The next day I would read it would drop a little bit. Like, okay, that's fine, you know, that's nothing too crazy. But the crazy part is like during this whole drop here, I was dosing like 2-part, and it just kept dropping. And all of a sudden, like the same day, like reading this, it just kept dropping and dropping. I was just like, dude, there's something wrong with the reading. So I primed like the line, because I thought error was in the line or something like that. And anyways, read it, came back up. And then so like yesterday, today, it looks like it's pretty stable, right? It went up like 0.04, which is good, because I want to bring up my alk to around 8 anyways. And if the 2-part and the calc is doing that slowly, great. I got my ferts, my nitrates dosing there as well. So yeah, that's my plan, just to kind of stabilize this whole system and just let it run without having too much interference with it. I've been trying to do small, very small water changes weekly, very small, like less than 5%, just to kind of keep everything stable, don't shock the system. And once we have a really consistent like alk, you know, salinity, and everything dialed in, then I'm gonna go look for some acros, because those acros are really sensitive to these changes and swings, because like this tank is all over the place right now, so it's just pooping all over the place too. So yeah, I've been measuring phosphates kind of shot up last week. Not too worried, because as I'm dosing nitrates, we need basically higher nitrates than phosphates. Right now phosphates higher, so that the macroalgae can intake and bring both of them down to a level where it's like good. So yeah, so I'm trying to basically bring up nitrates with the dosing, and that's the whole purpose of the dosing, is to bring that up, to bring phosphates back down to the same level that's kind of even. But yeah, so that's the plan for the tank. Stabilization. Hopefully these guys are not too far gone. I'm just gonna keep them in there, see if they come back in a couple months. If they don't, then we can kind of, you know, rest in peace. You know, we tried those guys, but we'll try again in the future. It's a learning curve, learning opportunity, and hopefully the next time you guys see this tank, the algae's gone or it's getting better. I can't wait to bring in the sand sifting gobies that I have outside that are in quarantine to this tank to kind of stir all this up and eat some of this algae and whatnot. So they're still in quarantine. They still have another month to go, so you guys won't not see any new fish for another month. Cross my fingers, just this tank just stabilize until we get those new fish in. It'll stir up all this so the sand will look nice, and then we'll just have to worry about the rock structure and just basically scrubbing it down, letting it get filtered out, and boom, this tank is gonna look beautiful. I hope you guys enjoy this week's update. This whole update is basically about how this tank is not stable. It's not stable at all. It's all over the place, and this is what you get for not being consistent and stable. You can get bleaching, a lot of bleaching. So yeah, patience, stable. That's the thing that we've learned so far. All right, guys, if you guys aren't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. And like always, the next one, guys, peace.